Greetings and salutations, my friends. I am your host, Pat626, and I host Subculture Shock Sunday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. And I actually started playing the song that you can hear in the background right now. What was it, like a couple years ago? And so I have been anxiously awaiting the latest album from Silver Walks. And tonight in the virtual studio, I have Daniel McCullough here ready to talk to us all about it. How's it going, Daniel?
Very well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm on vacation, so
Nice.
yeah. That's all we need right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this on camera. I love the studio setup. One of the best things about the virtual studio is I get to see everyone's setups there, and you have quite a few synths back there.
Yeah, don't tell my mother. Yeah, there's as far as hardware sense, there are quite a few here. It was something that I got into a little bit later. But over the course of time, I think I've collected about 10, 15 of them. Um, and it's funny that you mention it because I literally just tore apart the recording setup that I had for the record, and now it's all set up nicely in the background, and you get to see it.
Yay! Well, that feels special. So, we tend to, on this show, start off with what I like to call the supervillain origin story. So, how did you get into dark music, into electronic, synth industrial, and that sort of thing? Like, not just making it, but how did you start listening to it to begin with?
Well, it's a funny question to ask right now, actually, because in weird ways, it's all coming full circle. I came from I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, and there was not a heck of a lot um, going on at that time in terms of electronic music where I lived, and so I took the route many people did, which was getting into punk rock when you're a kid, and all of a sudden, I heard, like many others, I heard Nine Inch Nails on the radio, and there happened to be a record shop maybe 2 or 3 blocks from where I lived. So I walked down there. I had a couple of friends that worked there, and I said, I'm listening to this, um, and I really liked it. Could you give me something that's kind of like that? And what they handed me was Front 242's Tyranny for You.
Ooh, good choice.
And I'm still friends with the woman that did it to this day, actually, and I was laughing with her about it because we are 25 years later. Here I am about to play with Front 242, and it's just kind of funny how it all works out. But yeah, that's it. I had initially thought that I was going to be a writer of some kind, and I guess that I am, and still will be. But these bands like Front 242 and other ones that were referencing some of the literary stuff that I was into, like William Burroughs and things like that, and that's kind of what pushed me down that path, and I'm still on it.
Nobody's been able to kick you off of it yet.
I have I like everybody. I have my summer flings with other kinds of music, but it is where I always return to, for better or worse.
So you're sitting there and you're absorbing Front 242, Nine Inch Nails, and getting into more bands. How do you go from wanting to be a writer to, hey, I'm going to make this music?
Um, well, ultimately, I don't think it's all that different. In a literary sense, and you're an English major, so you're probably a writer as well. You're attempting to convey an emotion, convey a feeling, to convey meaning, and for my weird, fucked up ADD brain, it turns out that I was able to do that more immediately and more gratifyingly at that point with sound. And like I had mentioned before, with burrows and stuff, the cut up method stuff, that's not all that different from what early sampling was.
Huh.
So
That's a connection I hadn't made before, but you're absolutely right.
yeah, I can see maybe long threads that take a while to reach their destination, but I think that they definitely share a thread.
So did you start mostly in like the hardware like we see behind you?
Definitely not actually. I was super broke, as many people were. The thing that got me, I went to art school in Chicago, which is also something that pushed me down that road where I made friends who were into that kind of music, going to Neo, hanging out, going to the Metro, whatever. Um, but I was broke as a joke. So I started in software, and I tried to learn music earlier by very poorly playing the guitar. But it turns out that wasn't my instrument. I got a hold of a copy of Ableton,
Okay.
a copy of a plugin that is essentially a mini Moog emulation.
Ooh.
And that was something that I used then. And believe it or not, I still use the same one today. So
Still kind of the backbone of the band.
very much so. I find that the Moog stuff and the Moog sound, um, it's very intuitive for me, and I think that it is just. I was laughing with a friend of mine. The Mini Moog is the first synthesizer, but it's state doesn't need anything more. It's a classic tone for a reason. So if you knew how many how many hit records across how many different genres were just the sound of the Mini Moog in a different way, you'd be shocked, or maybe not.
I probably wouldn't be shocked, but it's probably a larger number than I'm thinking of regardless.
It's a rhetorical device.
Yeah, like it's probably not a small number.
Not by half.
Nah. So, we talked a little bit before going on live here that this is just like the latest iteration of projects for you. So, can we have a brief history of what led up to ultimately Silver Walks?
So I had been in a couple of my friends' bands. Was never particularly confident enough at the time to start my own. Didn't really work out, wasn't really my thing. And to my great shame, I more or less gave up for a long time. I went to school, and didn't really think that was going to be something that I pursued. And lo and behold, I heard of these guys in my hometown, Lancaster, who were starting a goth industrial night, and I thought that was crazy because it was and is in the surrounding area an extremely conservative place. Not really the sort of place that I thought that kind of thing would take off.
That's I'm going to stop you there before we go on, because that's a thing that I also keep hearing in these interviews. And it's very interesting to me because I think that is the exact place where these goth scenes explode. If you look at some of the big festivals, for instance, especially the ones like before there was a festival for every month of the year, the big ones were like in Salt Lake City, Utah, and in Georgia, which are not places you think of when you think of like liberal or leftist paradises. So
Sure.
I think there is something to say for the more repressed and oppressed people feel, the more likely you're going to see the alternative genres kind of exploding outward.
Absolutely, and it's something that time has borne out, because I met those guys and they were great people, still some of my best friends. It was Eric Kiltboy and Dave Gould, and they started a club night, and it was a smash hit. 15 years of packing every venue they walked into, and it's still going strong. So those guys always encouraged me to take another crack at starting a band because I would guest DJ sometime,
Mm-hmm.
and it all ultimately boiled down to those guys and like so many other things, Stephen Archer. Uh, we were all standing around watching Assemblage 23 sound check, and Stephen, who has a talent for straight talk, comes and just looks at me and goes, Dan, you clearly want to be doing this. Why aren't you doing this? And he got me. I had no good response. So I started doing it again, and this time it worked out. So that's kind of what led us here. So it's his
You know, I have a lot of bones to pick with Steve Archer sometimes, so it's only fair that I give credit where credit is due. Like,
Sure. I mean,
yeah.
Stephen can be a contentious individual. I love him dearly. I owe him a lot. But I'm not shocked to hear that. He's got strong opinions and he will tell them to you.
But at least you know where you stand with him, and I think that's an important thing. That's kind of that I'm glad that he gave you the kick in the pants that you needed to get
Good.
involved with this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He was the right boot in the butt at the right time. So
The right boot. That's all right. So I think that's got to be his next side project, the right boot.
it could be.
That's your duo right there. You guys work together. That's your new band.
The right boot.
Yep. Hashtag the right boot. Let's get it going. So, kind of jumping forward to this latest album, which is, like I said at the beginning of the interview, something that has kind of been in the works for a while now. Because I and so I think first we talk about how it really came to be, because it sounded like in our chat before the interview that you almost weren't certain you were going to keep doing another project, doing more music, and then all of a sudden 2020 happened.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting confluence of events. There's the writer Douglas Adams.
I do. I love Douglas Adams.
He said something that has stuck with me over the years, where I didn't wind up where I thought I was going, but I might have wound up where I needed to be.
Yeah.
And the way it happened, I wasn't really sure that it was something that I was going to pursue. I had been through it a couple of times, and I was just over the grind. And I had moved to Atlanta from the West Coast, and I had taken a job down there, just kind of starting a new life. And 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit. So I'm down there. I don't have anything physically. I don't know anybody.
And even if you did, you can't visit them anyway.
Exactly. And it was like the world sat me down and said, look, Dan, if you are going to do this, you're going to do it right now, because you're never going to get a better opportunity to. And I had been doing some remix work, just dabbling, and when I sat down to write, it had paid. The practice and the work had paid off, and I was starting to make things that carried that emotional resonance that I don't think was there in the very, very early experiments I had with music. So that was super cool. I wound up with maybe twice the number of tracks that wound up on the record, and just kept whittling it down until the ones that told the story were there. And as far as everything else, it's just a series of happy accidents. So I'm as pleased with it as I think I could be. I'm eager to start the next one.
So, I mean, you always want to like the art you've created, but I don't think there's any better there's any better compliment you can give yourself than, man, I loved this so much I want to do it again. I want to do
Yeah,
more of
yeah,
this.
exactly. I mean, when I would talk about when I would talk to other artists about it and other people, the thing that I don't even necessarily want money or fame or anything like that. What I want to
Good,
do,
because you're not in the right genre for money and fame.
God, don't I know it? But it's I want to make a piece of art that moves somebody else the way art moved me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
The way hearing something like Joy Division or hearing those early Front 242 albums or anything that resonated with you and changed your life artistically, that's what I wanted to do. And I don't think I quite got over the line for myself because I spent so much time making the songs that I also got sick of them.
Sure.
but but there were once or twice when I sat down and looked at some of the things that, say, some of the guest contributors or other people did, and it was just like, wow, that moved me, and that is what the end goal is. So in that regard, I would say it's very successful.
So, a thing about that, I find it very interesting because a lot of people, when you hear the pat answers of why do you want to be a musician, and it's usually, well, I really want to engender an emotion in someone else. I want to inspire people. I want them to feel the way I feel. And the interesting thing is that you instead are focusing on moving yourself the way that other music moved you. Like I want to be able to create something that affects me as well as Joy Division did, and such a personal thing. And honestly, I think even a very honest, in a very honest answer.
I guess that's the word I would go for, would be honest, because that's what I want my art to be. I mean, the best artistic connections I've ever seen people make are ones where they kind of bare their soul, and somebody looks at that and says in a very real kind of way that, while I might not be able to relate to the exact thing that you went through, I've been there. I know that feeling, and that can change people's lives. It changed mine, and I think it's an honor, and also a very high bar to set for yourself, because it's also saying, I'm not going to do this for the money. I'm not going to do the easy thing. I'm going to go do the thing that's going to matter, which is exponentially harder and maybe more thankless, but it's the thing that's going to give me the satisfaction in the end, and hopefully you too,
Well,
anybody who hears it.
well, and that's the thing. I think that by making it for yourself first, you kind of cut out all of the other traps that we fall into. I say this is someone that used to be in a band and still falls into this trap sometimes with the DJing and stuff like that, where if you worry too much about what other people think, it stops being fun. And I think as long as you're focusing on I want to have a good time with this, I want to blow my own mind, that's a much healthier way to go about it.
Sure. I agree with that. It's very easy to get sucked into the popularity trap, but we're working in a genre that was and is at the moment, although much less so than maybe a few years ago, maybe not the most fashionable. But the upside of that is that the people that are going to be here are not people who are just passing through because they saw it in Spin.
Right.
You know, they're people who relate to this. They're people who have an interest. So you're already one foot in the door if you're in a band. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I feel like they're this is a reductive point, as they all are, but I feel like mainly there are two types of goth industrial fans. those who like mainly want to listen to whatever they were listening to in their early 20s when they were first going to the clubs, and that's the feeling of home for them, and they just want to have that over and over again, and people who are constantly looking for a new home, for the next thing that's going to blow their mind.
And that's just a difference in people, I think. And
Yeah.
and neither are intrinsically good or bad. But I can say that, and I've done it, everybody does it. It's a human thing to do. I mean, I'll put it this way. I was in Philadelphia in 2001. I hear I had a great time dancing to future pop. If you ask me where, when, I don't care. No idea. All in the haze of the past, but I don't think I'd want to recreate that moment. I already had that moment.
Right. Even if you can't necessarily remember it.
Yeah. I can remember enough to know that I was there. But you catch my drift.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a time and a place, and chasing that time and a place is never going to happen again.
Right.
It's like people who want Wax Trax to exist again. Wax Trax was awesome, but Wax Trax is gone and has been for a very long time. But and another weird thing, actually rolling into an entirely new topic, is the interesting things that are happening now, watching that initial generation of industrial people kind of through cold waves and through other things encounter their artistic children, in the sense that there are a lot of very young people encountering and making EBM
Right.
or things that could very easily be EBM if they were willing to associate with the term.
Right.
We have all sorts of new generation people coming out of the woodwork. You've got Youth Code, you've got Trap Majesty, and all sorts of just a new generation of people discovering it. And that's really interesting to watch and see, and realize that that's going to happen forever.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we're like into
cool.
third generation goths.
Yeah,
and that's so fantastic. I mean, here I am sitting here, and people like call me an elder goth, and I just look at them like, well, if you insist.
Yeah. It's a thing that, how am I going to put this? It's a thing that I think kind of springs eternal.
Yeah.
Because
you hope anyway.
Yeah. A big thing that separates goth. I read a newspaper article about this, actually. A big thing that separates goth from, say, punk or a lot of other things is that it's as much an aesthetic and an appreciation for an aesthetic as it is any particular thing. So it's something that can grow with people. You see people in their 60s now that still are going out and dancing to goth and industrial, and not always just the stuff they grew up with. So
those people are my heroes too.
Oh, I love them.
Yeah.
At our night in Pennsylvania, my friend, I have a couple of friends. I won't name them by name, but they're the first people there, and dancing is their therapy, and they will dance all night, and that's amazing to see. And you realize that this can be forever if you want it to be. It can be a part of your life.
As long as enough people want it to be, and as long as you want to make it your life. Like, and so kind of getting back to that, it sounds like with the new album, Various Positions. Hello, friendo.
Secret, second band member here.
All right, so who's the second band? I'm abandoning the question. I want to know about the cat.
This is Groovy.
Hey, Groovy, you are adorable.
Groovy's
okay. So it sounds like the new album, Various Positions, has kind of been your moment of realizing, okay, I do want to do this forever.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So you said that you cut out a lot of things to until you got the story that you wanted to tell. Now, does that mean that there is a common set of moods and themes running through the album, or is there an actual, like, is this a concept album?
It's not a. It is a concept album, but it's not a linear story.
Okay.
The thing about various positions, and the hint is in the title. It's a reference to Leonard Cohen. It's a sexual reference. I'm sure I don't need to draw you a picture there.
Wait, what is sex?
A thing. I don't know. It's been a while. But it was, in all seriousness, various positions, the various positions you find yourself in life,
Right.
the various positions politically that you take. There's a bunch of different things there, but as far as the concept goes, the various positions is the various crisis situations in life that the stories we're telling were born in. Some of them are mine, some of them are other people's. Some of them are in the present tense, as in something somebody is actively going through. Some of them are things in retrospect and in reflection. So yeah, I would say it's a concept album, but not in really like a linear way.
It's not narratively a concept album, but thematically, absolutely.
Very much so. There
Yeah.
are themes of growing up, growing apart from people you love, learning to deal with really adult situations, and maybe not always getting it right, but learning from it. And those are the themes.
So as much as I've been talking about the pandemic this entire year of Subculture Talk, but I think that's what's informing this next series of questions. Do you think that not only in giving you enough time and motivation to complete this album, do you think that the stories that you're telling on it could have existed without the pandemic? Do you think that directly informed the stories that you were telling?
I don't think that it directly informed the stories that I was telling. However, if anything was informed by the pandemic, it was the actual music.
Right.
Because I had hours and hours and hours to sit and listen to things on loop and draw out these huge 70 track, 80 track soundscapes. I think that actually worked a little bit against it, because one, we're talking about occasionally depressing things. We're in a isolating situation, and trying to tackle a creative project. I think I would have appreciated having less time, because I definitely went into second guessing myself mode, and definitely caught the COVID blues hard.
Okay.
And bless him, John Fryer was so patient. I'm sure he was not so chuffed with how long I took to get it, but he was patient. He was super proactive in giving me guidance, and stuck with it through the end. So I have to say he did a really great job, and I'm glad that we picked him to work with, because he seemed to instinctively get where I was trying to go emotionally, and he had no problem with telling me, hey, this part over here is the part that doesn't work, find something else.
I feel like John Fryer is just the name that I hear on all of my favorite records these days.
Well, that's kind of why I went with him, and it's so funny. This record has so many happy accidents on it. I had moved to California for work, because I had been working at an Apple adjunct company at the time. And one of my dear friends from back east is Rex Arcana. I'm good friends with him. It turns out that he is from the same town in Pennsylvania that I'm from, so we became friends pretty quickly. And I had met up with him out in San Francisco, and a couple other folks came with us. Liz from Vor Aurora, who is awesome as well, and Christian from Cop International, who it has the best friggin' attitude about anything. And life,
100% agree.
oh man, Christian's great. And life kept putting me in Christian's way. Like I would buy shelves off of Craigslist, and wouldn't you know, rolling up the street in Alameda comes Christian in his white van, dropping it off for me. I decided to ask Christian, hey, look, I'm looking for a producer because I don't necessarily know what I don't know. I'm entirely self-taught in terms of production and music. And he was like, it's funny you ask. And he pointed me to John. And John has worked with a lot of records that I look at, and they're telling the same kind of emotional stories that I wanted to express myself. So it was not a very difficult thing to say yes to.
Oh yeah, it's like, hey, so I'm looking for a producer. How about the best producer in the scene right now? How about the guy that is just turning lead into gold? And I don't say like lead into gold because I'm not saying anybody's putting out lead, but a guy that just seems to magically make everything sound amazing.
Yeah, it's like, how about the guy who did Pretty Hate Machine?
Yeah.
Oh, how can I argue with that?
No, I'm done. All right, here we go. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very much a happy accident, but I would absolutely work with John again. And I swear, John, I'll be quicker next time.
Well, it sounds like that's why it almost seems like, because you said you almost hit your goal with this album and you feel like you can in the next one, and maybe having less time this next time around will allow for that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about technology is that the technology has grown to a place where anybody could do this with a pretty regular computer that you pick up anywhere. And the problem with that is that you never have to make a choice anymore. And that is something I know that I get choice paralysis when I'm working on things. And the way that I have gotten around it is to take things away and say these two instruments, this amount of time is what I have. Get in there, and I need to walk out with something I can use. So when you are in a pandemic situation by yourself for a couple years,
those boundaries don't matter anymore.
Right. And so you just you can float off very easily. And that was the big difficulty this time. So the problem next time is, or rather the challenge I'm going to give myself is, okay, you've got a week, this, and this, make a song. And if you don't have a song by the end of the week, you're done. Move on. So
scrap it and come back to it later.
Yep.
So I do feel like, and maybe this is a result of the amount of time that you had to make the album, but I mentioned at the beginning that I heard the first track well before the rest of the album was released, and I feel like the later songs that you released, Conscience and Tear Me Down, those seem to be very different from Lantern. Was it always planned to be that way? Were you always planning to kind of hit a wide level of subgenre, or did it just kind of happen the longer the album process went on?
This is a great question. The answer is both. They were intended to be different, just because, I mean, the last EP we did was almost all synthpop.
Right.
And in consequence, while it's a very, very sad song, is that kind of upbeat synth-pop track. The way it all happened, I sat down and something that a lot of bands in this genre don't do, but we actually just gave me a period of time, and I sat down and played. I sat down jammed out ideas. Although I hate the word jam because everybody gets the idea of fish. But we sat down and played some music, and got maybe 40 ideas down, and the ones that really showed promise just started growing in different directions.
Okay.
For example, one of the very first ones that was worked on for this record was Silence the Dark, and that has almost a drum and bass feel to
Right.
it. And that came from me doing a remix for Sweat Boys, actually, that Ben was not able to use. So he just gave it back to me, and it became something very different. So that's part of why
I didn't want you to have it anyway.
Well, I love Ben.
Yeah,
I absolutely love him. I room with him at Cold Wave sometimes, and I would be more than glad to do another remix for him. He just whatever he was working on fell apart and said,
Right.
you know, I can't in good conscience keep this. You should do something with this. This is good. So thank you, Ben. But he that's why when we're going through these jam style ideas, sometimes they can be very, very different. And something that I don't like about industrial music is that it is very, very tunnel vision these days, and very, very I have one sound. This is the thing that I stick to. And if I vary from it too far, I'm not going to be okay. If that's the kind of approach you take to music, this is probably not the record for you. But there's cinematic stuff in terms of Rose and Blood Red Field. There's wax traxy kind of stuff. There's more rocky kind of stuff, and there are a couple of synthpop tracks there. So I'd say it's an accurate reflection of my interests. Was it intended to happen that way? Oh, a little yes, a little no.
Like you wanted everything to be different, but they grew in ways that you didn't expect them to grow.
Right. But the great thing about it was that they sort of grew back together. So I just let that be. Yeah. And
Happy accidents.
Yes, that could be the name of this record, to be completely frank with you.
All right. Well, if you name the next record that, I want a special thanks in the liner notes.
Absolutely. You will be right at the top.
So, I'm sorry. Now I'm just seeing my name in lights.
Okay.
So you've got this under the belt now, and it sounds like you're going to be playing out with it a little bit. But how much of this do you want to like? Do you want to tour on the record, and how much do you want to just get back and write the next one?
Well, it's little of A, little of B. We did 4 shows a little earlier in the year, just to get the machine moving again, get ourselves out of quarantine. They went about as well as you could expect for people who've been, crammed in a closet for 2 years trying to avoid gig. But
well, the good news, everyone else was crammed in the closet too, so they didn't know any better.
Yeah, and just being able to get out and talk to people was a marvelous, marvelous thing. We played Brooklyn. We played a couple of places in Pennsylvania. We are playing one more show in Lancaster, Millersville, with Front 242, which is a fucking trip.
Woo!
Yeah, I'm going to be 15-year-old, extremely happy, extremely stressed out Dan that day.
I was going to say, can you just let me know if you actually managed to vibrate through a solid wall?
I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that I will.
Yeah. Just get it on camera.
We love playing live. We love getting out there and interacting with people. If you know any place that would love to have us, we'd love to go there. We had discussed some tour plans before COVID hit with a couple of bands. But as we all know, that just did not happen. Depending on how things go, We may look to do another run of shows up and down the East Coast. But really, I would say that the burning desire for all of us is to get some more material under the belt, and come up with a wider repertoire. Because if we're going out and playing, we don't want to play the same set list every night. We'd like to be able to change it. Something that I always enjoyed about well, one, Front 242, and a band like the Swans, if you go see them, the songs may be very different from what you heard on the record. You still have the capacity to potentially be surprised.
Right.
And that's something that I want to explore a little bit, and getting a little more flexibility live, and being able to do different things.
Well, if you want to go completely different, I can be your kazoo player, because that's about all I got in terms of live music.
Hey, you know what? If it's fitting the vibe and everybody else is still having fun too, why not?
Pat 626 kazoo project coming 2023.
With remixes by Combi Christ.
Nope. So we're getting near the end here, but there was one question that I've been trying to fit in, and just wasn't quite sure where to do it. So sure. You do the vast majority of the writing and the performing for Silverwalks. Mm-hmm. So, especially in a situation where you were just trapped inside the studio, almost literally, for 2 years working on this album, I imagine it was refreshing to send it out to other people and say, okay, now add on to this. But was that also were there any nerves involved with that after you'd spent so long crafting something?
The answer is that with the things that wound up being sung by other people, the only one that I had actually intended to be a collaboration with another individual before it actually happened was Rose in a Blood Red Field, because I love Gabby's voice. Right. And I got to go over to her and say, hey, get screaming with this. And a lot of people don't know this, but Gabby is a metalhead.
I do know that.
Pretty much. So she was very, very chomping at the bit to get her scream on. With Silence the Dark and with Tear Me Down, those were actually remixes that I had done for Stella and Coral. And they got the music and they both liked it so much that they wound up saying, you know what? Can I just get rid of my old vocals and write a song with this? Who am I to say no? Go for it. If you have an idea, I want to see you run with it. And with the results I got, I think it was the right choice. With Mark, we had played a show together in Philly, where he and Jean-Luc were performing as C-Tech, ChemLab, all those guys, and it turned out we had both just recently moved to San Francisco.
Oh,
so he invited me over, and we got along famously. So we hung out. I had this track that had this very, very New Order-y kind of vibe. And I couldn't find the vocal for the life of me. So Mark wound up talking to me one night and said, oh, you know what? I'll take a look at these songs. No promises. I'm thinking, oh, yeah, whatever. He's not going to do it. Right. Not as a cruel kind of way, but he's got other things to worry about. Would you know that the literal next day, I went to bed and woke up with something in my inbox, and it was the something that was in my inbox was In Consequence. He nailed it in 2 takes.
Jesus.
Yeah. I literally said, "Oh, fucking A," like right out loud, because it was great. It's a fantastic track, and he nailed the vibe completely. So, like I said, happy accidents are the story of this album. So,
that's so. You know, for an album that is so like at parts sad and lonely and angry, there's a lot of joy that went into the making of it. Just a lot of like wonderful moments that came out of it.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's part of the beauty of the creative process. It's like birth, you know. It's something difficult and bloody and occasionally dark, but it winds up with a beautiful result.
We hope.
Killing my metaphor here, man.
I told you, you're on the Thinks Too Much show. Well, Dan, this has been an amazing interview. So let's pretend that some people have been living under a rock for the past month and weren't aware that Various Positions is just released. Where can they find your music? What's a good place to get
They're
it?
called Silver Walks. You can find us at Distortion Productions, distortionprod.com, silverwalks.net, silverwalk.bandcamp.com, and as of August, you can find us on Spotify, on iTunes, all over the place. Silver Walks.
Awesome.
Look for the big dumb Irish guy. That's me. We are playing on September 11th with Front 242 and DJ Stygian in Millersville, PA. The reason I call this out is that it's probably a 400 or 500 capacity club. You are never going to see Front 242 in a club that small again, and especially not when it is brand spanking new.
Yeah.
So if you have ever wanted to go see them and might be down for a trip, that will be a fantastic.
That's the one.
Yep.
Oh, excellent. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention before I cut you loose?
No. Aside from thank you.
My pleasure, Dan.
Thank you for doing this independent journalism stuff. I mean, like I had mentioned to you personally, when I was younger, I did that too, and those kind of outlets are just the lifeblood of an independent music scene, and especially one that is as far from the mainstream as ours is. So I think you're doing a great thing, and thanks for having me.
Well, it was my pleasure. You're welcome here anytime. And good luck on the next record. I can't wait to hear it. I'm going to go back to listen to this one. So there is no live version of this one. So you're watching the recording. I would suggest that once this is done, you go and check out Silver Walks on Bandcamp. Distortion Productions, lots of great stuff there. And have a good time. Good night.
Guys, thank you.